The girl collapsed in Alistair Grant's arms on a Tuesday, 3 seconds after he'd decided to mind his own business after all. One moment she was running, bolting like she'd done it before, knew how to disappear. The next, her legs simply quit. He caught her by instinct, the way you catch falling teacups, and found himself holding a child who weighed approximately nothing and smelled like rain and 3 weeks of sleeping rough. "Bloody hell," he muttered. Up close, the alien features were obvious. Blue-tinted skin, pale as milk. Silver hair plastered to her skull. Ears that ended in subtle points. But it was her eyes that stopped him, violet with silver flecks, half open and unfocused, staring past him at his shop window. At the map. "Please," she whispered. "The map. That's..." Then she was out. Gone. Dead weight in his arms in the middle of Grassmarket, rain hammering down, Mrs. Chun from next door shouting something he couldn't hear over the blood pounding in his ears. He carried her inside his shop. Because what else was he going to do, leave her in the street? She woke up on his restoration table, surrounded by 400 years of cartographic history and the smell of vellum and ink. Couldn't have been more than 12. Small for her age, or maybe Calithians were just smaller. Hard to tell when someone looked half-starved. Alistair was across the room, kettle on. Eleanor's kettle, the one she'd insisted on keeping even after the electric one was easier. He realized he hadn't made tea for another person since her funeral. For years. "You're Calithian," he said without turning around. Silence. Then, "How did you know?" The ears. The eyes. He brought her tea, the way Eleanor had taught him, proper and strong. "You're supposed to be in refugee processing. Hampstead facility, isn't it?" "I left." "They know that. I expect they've noticed by now." Her English was too careful. Each word chosen placed. Like she'd learned the language from recordings, not people. She took the tea with both hands, shaking so hard the cup rattled. Alistair lowered himself into his chair, the way he did everything now, carefully, like his spine might crack if he moved wrong. 67 and feeling every year of it. "You've been watching my shop for 15 days. You counted? Hard not to." You stood in the same spot. Stared at the same map. He gestured to the window display. "Why?" She didn't answer. Just stared at the map in his window, the one he'd drawn 20 years ago from probe data. Calith Prime. A commission he'd taken because it paid well, and because mapping alien worlds from survey data was easier than dealing with tourists asking if he had anything with Edinburgh Castle on it. Beautiful world, he'd thought at the time. Shame we'll never visit. He'd seen the news 3 months ago. Brief report. Calithian homeworld destroyed. Evacuation ships lost. 30,000 dead. He looked at the girl, thin as a rail, drowning in clothes 3 sizes too big, hands wrapped around his wife's favorite teacup. Maybe more than 30,000. Maybe everyone. "That map," he said quietly. "That's your home, isn't it?" She nodded once. Like more would break something. "Where did you get it?" Her voice cracked. "How do you have this?" "Drew it myself. Probe survey 2005. Client wanted detailed topography of the capital region. Paid me to render it in ink. Traditional cartography, none of that digital rubbish." He paused. "Took me 3 months. Most detailed map I'd ever drawn of a place I'd never visit. Varnethel." She was crying now, tears running silent down her face. "The capital. I lived there. 3rd District. Kelmar Avenue. Blue door. 2nd floor flat." Her precision made his hands still on his teacup. "Not somewhere in the city, or the south side. Exact district. Exact street. Exact door color." "You remember it that specifically?" "I remember everything." She looked at him then really looked. Every street. Every building. Every tree in every park. Down to the centimeter. My species evolved perfect spatial memory, for navigation. For not getting lost. Something in his chest tightened. Not grief. Not quite. Something else. "That map in my window," he said slowly. "That's probably the only surviving detailed image of your world. The probe data's lost. Company went bankrupt in 2008. Files corrupted. So you're saying?" "I'm saying you've been standing in the rain for 15 days staring at the last remaining picture of your home. And I'm saying," he stopped, took a breath. "I'm saying you should probably eat something before you pass out again. And then we should talk." "About what?" Alistair looked at this child who'd lost her world, who carried every detail in her mind, who'd somehow found the one shop in Edinburgh that held the last image of home. Eleanor had asked him, at the end, to map something beautiful. Somewhere she could visit in dreams. Maybe he'd just found it. About making sure your home isn't forgotten, he said. About making sure it survives, even if only on paper. About maps. Maps, she repeated. Maps, he confirmed. I'll draw. You'll remember. Between us, we'll put Calith Prime back together. That's impossible. But I'm Scottish and you're desperate. That's a dangerous combination. For the first time, she almost smiled. I'm Sarah, she said. Sarah Valketh. Alistair Grant. And before you ask, no, I've no idea what I'm doing. But neither do you. So we're even. Outside, Edinburgh went about its business. Inside, an old cartographer and a lost girl sat in silence, staring at the last picture of a world that no longer existed. Tomorrow, they'd start drawing it back. Alistair woke to screaming at 3 in the morning and thought, for one confused moment, that Eleanor was back and dying again. Then his brain caught up. Eleanor was 4 years gone. The screaming was coming from the spare room. From Sarah. He knocked over his reading glasses getting out of bed, cracked his knee on the doorframe, and found her sitting bolt upright in Eleanor's old bed, eyes open but seeing something that wasn't there. The sounds coming out of her weren't quite words, at least not in English. Calithian, probably. The cadence of absolute terror. Sarah, lass, you're safe. He kept his distance. Dr. Patel had warned him about this. Refugee trauma, night terrors, don't touch unless she reaches first. You're in Edinburgh. You're with Alistair. You're safe. She didn't respond. Just kept screaming in that broken glass voice, hands clutched in the sheets like they were the only solid thing left in the universe. Alistair stood there feeling useless, which was a familiar feeling, but not a welcome one. Eleanor had been better at this sort of thing. People things. He was better at paper. Paper. He took the stairs faster than his knees appreciated, grabbed his sketchbook from the restoration table, the one where he'd started roughing out Sarah's neighborhood from her descriptions that afternoon, and brought it back up. Sarah, look. He held the sketchbook in front of her, close enough to see but not touching. Look, lass. It's still here. Your world. We started mapping it today, remember? Kelmar Avenue. The blue door. It's still here. It's safe. The screaming cut off like a switch flipped. Her eyes focused. Found the sketch. Found the careful ink lines of the street she described in painful detail. 12 buildings on the left, 15 on the right, the bakery on the corner with its purple awning, her building third from the end. Her hand reached out. Trembling. Touched the paper. You drew this. Not a question. A statement, like she needed to confirm reality. This afternoon. You told me about your street, and I drew it. Started with your building, the one with the blue door. Got the crack in the third step, see? You said you always tripped on it. I did. Her voice was small. Younger than 11. Every morning. Mother said I'd trip over my own feet, even on flat ground. Where is your mother now? Wrong question. He knew it the second her face crumpled. She died in the first bombardment. Father got me to the evacuation ship. He didn't make it on board. Flat. Clinical. The way you say things when feeling them would break you in half. The ship crashed 3 weeks later. I'm the only survivor. Christ Jesus. I'm sorry, lass. Everyone's sorry. She was still touching the drawing, fingers tracing the ink lines. Sorry doesn't bring them back. No, it doesn't. He sat down on the floor, back against the wall. His knees complained, but he ignored them. Knees always complained. But maybe this does. A little. Mapping the place they lived. Making sure someone knows it existed. Making sure it's not forgotten. Sarah looked at him properly for the first time since waking. Violet eyes red-rimmed from crying. Too old for an 11-year-old face. You really think we can map the whole planet? I think we can try. You've got the memory. I've got the hands. He held up his ink-stained fingers. Well, I've got hands. Whether they work properly is another matter. Arthritis is a bastard. You're in pain. Most days. Not important. How is that not important? Because pain means I'm still alive, he said. Eleanor taught me that. Near the end, when the cancer was bad, I asked if she wanted more morphine. She said no. Said the pain meant she was still here. Still fighting. Still herself. He looked at his hands. Broken can't work. Damaged still functions. There's a difference. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then, do you still talk to her? Your wife. Every day. Does she answer? No. But I talk anyway. Seems rude not to, just because she's dead. That surprised a laugh out of her. Small, startled, like she'd forgotten laughing was possible. You're strange, she said. Well, you're an 11-year-old with perfect spatial memory who can recall an entire planet in centimeter precision. We're both strange. Might as well be strange together. The nightmares will keep happening. Probably. I'll wake you up. I'm usually awake anyway. Insomnia's another bastard. He pushed himself to his feet, joints popping. Tell you what, when the nightmares come, I'll bring the sketchbook. We'll look at what we've drawn. Remind you it's still there. Still safe on paper, even if it's gone everywhere else. Why are you doing this? Alistair thought about Eleanor. About 40 years of wanting children and getting heartbreak instead. About the empty rooms in his flat, the silent shop, the maps of places that didn't exist anymore. About purpose. About grief. About the girl who'd stood in the rain for 15 days just to look at home. Because you need saving, he said. And because I need a reason to get up in the morning that isn't just habit. Seems like we can help each other out. That's it. That's it. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Then, carefully, the nightmare was about the ship crash. About the other refugees dying. About being alone. You're not alone now. No. No. You're stuck with a grumpy Scottish cartographer who's going to teach you everything I know about map making. Fair warning, I'm a terrible teacher. Ask Eleanor. I tried teaching her to draw once, and we both gave up after 10 minutes. I'd like to learn. Then we'll start tomorrow. Properly. Your entire neighborhood, every street, every building, every shop. All of it. He paused. But first you need to sleep. Or try to anyway. Will you stay? Until I fall asleep? Alistair's chest did something complicated. Alas, I'll stay. He sat in Eleanor's old chair, the one by the window where she'd read at night, and watched Sarah curl up under the blanket. She kept the sketchbook next to her pillow. Like an anchor. Like proof. Alistair? Her voice was already getting drowsy. Thank you. For catching me. For bringing me inside. For. She trailed off. For not minding my own business? Yes. He smiled at the dark ceiling, at Eleanor's ghost, at whatever twist of fate had brought a refugee child to his doorstep. Go to sleep, Sarah. We've got a world to map in the morning. She was asleep in minutes. Alistair stayed until dawn, watching her breathe, making sure the nightmares didn't come back. Outside, Edinburgh woke slowly. Inside, an old man sat guard over a child who'd lost everything, protecting the only thing she had left. Her memories. And now, thanks to him, her maps. Mrs. Chun brought soup on Thursday, and a social worker brought paperwork on Friday. The soup came with dumplings, 3 pairs of jeans that might actually fit Sarah, and a lecture about nutrition delivered in Mandarin-accented English that made Alistair feel 12 years old again. This child is Bones, Mrs. Chun said, hands on hips in the middle of his shop. You feed her? Toast, Alistair offered. Eggs yesterday. Toast. He says toast. Mrs. Chun looked at Sarah like they were co-conspirators against male incompetence. You come to my shop every day. 4 o'clock. I teach you to cook real food. Not toast. I like toast, Sarah said quietly. You like being alive? Then you eat soup. Build strength. She turned back to Alistair. And you? When is the last time you ate properly? I had toast this morning. Ayaya. 2 fools together. I bring soup every Thursday. You eat. No arguing. She left before Alistair could point out that he hadn't actually agreed to anything. That was how Mrs. Chun operated. You didn't agree. You just did what she said, and your life got better. The social worker was less helpful. Her name was Miss Winters, and she arrived at 9 in the morning with a clipboard, a tight smile, and questions that felt like accusations. Mr. Grant. I'm here about Sarah Valketh. Our records show she left the Hampstead facility 3 weeks ago. We've been searching for her. Well, you found her. Alistair didn't move from his position at the restoration table, where he was inking the western edge of Kelmar Avenue. Sarah was upstairs, still asleep. He'd kept her up late the night before mapping. She's safe. Federal. Has a bed. I'm sure she does. However, unauthorized foster placement. I'm not fostering. She's helping with a project. Research assistant. Miss Winters looked at the maps covering every surface. At the partially completed drawing of an alien city. At Alistair's ink-stained hands and skeptical face. Mr. Grant, she's 11 years old. And she's got perfect spatial memory of an entire planet that no longer exists. I'm a cartographer. We're mapping her world before she forgets. Or before he stopped. Before she dies. Before trauma wipes the memories. Before time erodes what war destroyed. Before it's too late. That's very philanthropic. But there are procedures. Background checks. Home inspections. She needs to be in proper care. She needs to be somewhere she's not running away from, Alistair said flatly. How many foster placements has she had? Miss Winters consulted her clipboard. 2. The first family felt they weren't equipped for her needs. The second placement lasted 3 days before she absconded. And you want to try for a third? Maybe she's running because you keep shipping her to strangers who treat her like a problem to be managed. He set down his pen. She's been here 6 days. Has she run? No, but. Has she eaten? Slept? Started talking about something other than trauma? Mr. Grant. She watches me draw maps of her home, and she tells me stories about the bakery that sold purple pastries and the fountain in the square where she learned to swim. Yesterday she laughed. Actually laughed. When's the last time your reports mention laughter? Miss Winter's mouth thinned. I understand you mean well. But you're 67 years old, single, no prior experience with children. I'm old, alone, and clueless. I know. Sarah knows it too. Doesn't seem to bother her. He picked up the pen again. File whatever paperwork you need to file. Do your inspections. I'll cooperate. But I'm not sending her back to your system unless you can guarantee she'll be better off there. Can you? Silence. That's what I thought, Alistair said. Close the door on your way out. Draft comes through. Miss Winters left, but her expression promised this wasn't over. Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs 5 minutes later. I heard. Sorry. Didn't mean to wake you. You told her no. Why? Alistair looked at the maps spread across his table. 6 days of work. Sarah's neighborhood taking shape in ink and memory. Every building, every street, every detail she'd carried across space and time. Because I started something, he said. And I finish what I start. Even when my hands hurt. Even when bureaucrats tell me I'm daft. Especially then. Sarah came down the stairs, moved to the table. Studied the day's work. You got the fountain wrong, she said. It's 17 meters in diameter, not 15. And there were 8 spouts, not 6. Show me. She picked up a pencil. She'd graduated from just describing to sketching rough layouts, and corrected his work with quick, precise strokes. Perfect circles. Exact proportions. No hesitation. There. Like that. Alistair looked at her corrections. Looked at her face, still too thin, still too haunted but focused now. Present. Here. Right then, he said. Let's do the whole square today. Every building around it. Every tree. Every bench where you sat. All of it. That's 32 buildings. I've got ink. You've got memory. We'll manage. He flexed his hands, working through the morning stiffness. Tell me about the northeast corner. The building with the green awning. Sarah closed her eyes. 4 stories. Stone facade. 18 windows facing the square. The awning was emerald green. My father hated it, said it clashed with everything. Ground floor was a bookshop. They had a cat. Gray, fat, always sleeping in the window. His name was Mr. Whiskers, but everyone called him Chairman because he judged you when you walked past. Her voice steadied as she talked. The nightmares receded. The memories became maps. And Alistair drew, line by careful line, rebuilding a world 1 ink stroke at a time. By sunset, they'd finished the square. By midnight, they'd started the neighboring district. Outside, Edinburgh slept. Inside, an old cartographer and a refugee child worked by lamplight, mapping the unmappable, preserving what couldn't be saved. 1 memory at a time. 1 line at a time. Forever, if that's what it took. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Alistair was starting to hate Tuesdays. On expensive paper with an embossed header that screamed money and authority. Galactic Archive Institute. Preserving Universal Heritage since 2187. He read it twice, then read it again to make sure he wasn't having a stroke. Sarah, he called upstairs. Come down here a moment. She appeared, pencil still in hand, silver hair falling in her eyes. They'd been working for 3 weeks now. The maps covered 2 walls of his shop, Varnethel taking shape in obsessive detail. She'd gained weight, stopped flinching at loud noises. Yesterday she'd corrected his perspective on a municipal building and called him stubborn as a mule, with something that might have been affection. What is it? Apparently you're a valuable data resource. He handed her the letter. They want to borrow your brain. Sarah read, her expression going from confused to pale. They want to extract my memories? Non-invasive neural mapping, they call it. Alistair's voice had gone flat. Dangerous. 20-hour scanning sessions. Full sensory recall. Complete spatial memory download. For the preservation of Calithian cultural heritage. How did they find me? The social worker, probably. Or they've been tracking refugee populations. Doesn't matter. He took the letter back. What matters is they think you're a database they can plug into. The compensation, Sarah's voice was small. They're offering you £50,000. I saw that bit. That's a lot of money. It is. You could. No. Sarah looked up at him. You didn't let me finish. Didn't need to. The answer's no. Alistair crumpled the letter. They're not scanning your brain like you're a bloody hard drive. They're not putting you in a machine for 20 hours to relive every moment of your planet dying. And they're definitely not paying me to hand you over like merchandise. But, no buts. I don't care if they offer £1 million. You're not data. You're a person. A person who's the only surviving Calithian. Her voice cracked. Maybe I should. Maybe it's my responsibility. Your responsibility is to heal. To sleep without screaming. To be 11 years old instead of carrying the weight of an entire species. He softened his tone. Sarah, love, what we're doing here. The maps, the memories, that's preservation. But it's preservation that lets you live while you do it. Their way. That's extraction. That's trauma for profit dressed up as science. They said it's non-invasive. And I say it's exploitation. He pointed at the maps on the wall. You know the difference between what we're doing and what they want. We map when you're ready. When you choose to remember. When the memory doesn't hurt too much, we stop. We rest. We drink Mrs. Chen's soup, and we try again tomorrow. He moved to stand beside her, looking at their work. Their way. They'll pull every memory out of you whether you're ready or not. Every street, every face, every moment of the bombardment. Your mother dying. Your father not making it onto the ship. The crash. All of it. For their database. For papers and press releases about preserving lost cultures. You don't know that. I know that no one asking for 20 hours of neural scanning gives a damn about the person being scanned. They care about the data. His hands were shaking. He shoved them in his pockets. I won't let them do that to you. It's not your choice. You're right. It's yours. I'm just telling you what I think. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at the maps they'd made together. 3 weeks of work. Her world, rebuilt one careful line at a time. What do they get? She asked finally. From the scanning? Perfect digital replica of every memory. They can generate 3D models, virtual reality reconstructions, complete architectural databases. Everything. And what do I get? Alistair looked at her. Really looked. Saw the exhaustion beneath the question. Trauma, he said honestly. Relived over and over. Pulled out of you for strangers to study. Your memories, your mother, your father, your home, reduced to academic curiosity. And if I say no, then we keep doing what we're doing. Slower. Safer. On your terms. He paused. But they won't like that answer. What will they do? Don't know. Probably try legal channels. Argue you're too young to refuse, that I'm obstructing heritage preservation. Might try to remove you from my care. His voice hardened. Let them try. You'd fight them? Sarah, I'm a 67-year-old cartographer with arthritis and no legal claim to you whatsoever. Fighting's about the only thing I can do. He managed a grim smile. Besides, I'm Scottish. We're good at fighting losing battles. It's practically our national sport. That surprised a laugh out of her. Watery but real. Alistair? I don't want the scanning. I don't want strangers in my head. Then that's the answer. They'll make trouble. Good. I was getting bored anyway. Sarah looked at him. This grumpy old man who'd caught her when she fell, who drew maps by lamplight, who sat through her nightmares without complaint, who was willing to fight institutions and bureaucracies and anyone else who threatened her. Why are you doing this? She asked. Not for the first time. This time, Alistair's answer was different. Because Eleanor would've, he said quietly. Because she spent 40 years wanting children and never got them, and she'd be furious with me if I let you go now. Because you matter more than their bloody database. He picked up his pen. And because we're not finished. We've got 247 districts left to map. Can't stop now. 246, Sarah corrected. We finished the Mercantile District last night. See? I need you. I can't even count properly. Sarah smiled. Small but there. Okay, she said. We tell them no. We tell them no, Alistair agreed. The response letter he drafted was considerably less polite than theirs had been. 3 days later, Dr. Marcus Webb from the Galactic Archive Institute arrived in person. And that's when things got complicated. Dr. Marcus Webb was younger than Alistair expected, mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. He arrived on a Saturday morning without warning, stepping into the shop like he owned it, looking at the maps on the walls with the expression of someone appraising assets. Mr. Grant. Marcus Webb, Galactic Archive Institute. He didn't offer his hand. I'm here to discuss Sarah Valketh. She's not here. A lie. She was upstairs, hiding the moment they'd heard the shop bell. And we sent our answer. No. Yes, I read your colorful response. Webb's smile tightened. I was hoping we could discuss this rationally. You may have misunderstood our intentions. I understood fine. You want to strap a child into a machine and pull her memories out like files from a computer. Neural mapping is completely safe. Safe for who? You. Your database? Certainly not for the 11-year-old with PTSD who wakes up screaming 3 nights a week. Webb's expression flickered. You're emotionally invested. Understandable. But you're not thinking about the bigger picture. Enlighten me. Calith Prime is gone. Completely destroyed. Sarah Valketh is the only surviving member of her species with intact memories of the homeworld. What she carries, he gestured at the walls. What you're crudely sketching on paper, that's irreplaceable data. Architectural history, urban planning, cultural geography. It belongs in an archive where it can be properly preserved and studied. It belongs to her, Alistair said flatly. She's not a museum exhibit. No one's suggesting. You're suggesting exactly that. You want to turn her trauma into academic papers, her memories into virtual reality tours, her mother's death into data points. Alistair's voice went cold. How many citations do you reckon you'll get? Tenure track sorted, is it? Webb's professional mask slipped slightly. This isn't about personal gain, isn't it? Because that letterhead says Galactic Archive Institute. But I looked you up, Dr. Webb. You've published 47 papers on lost civilizations, all based on neural extraction from refugees. You've made quite the career out of other people's suffering. I preserve knowledge that would otherwise be lost. You exploit trauma survivors who don't know they can say no. Alistair took a step forward. Webb stepped back. Here's what you actually are, Dr. Webb. You're a vulture in a nice suit, circling damaged people and calling it science. And you're not getting near Sarah. Mr. Grant, you're not her legal guardian. You have no authority. I have her trust. That's more authority than your bloody clipboard will ever give you. Trust won't hold up in court. There it was. The threat he'd been waiting for. You're taking me to court? The Galactic Heritage Preservation Act allows for compulsory memory preservation when a species faces extinction. Sarah Valketh represents irreplaceable cultural data. If she refuses to cooperate voluntarily, Webb shrugged. The courts can compel cooperation. She's a child. She's the last Calethian. The law is clear. The law is an ass, Alistair said. And so are you if you think I'm letting this happen without a fight. You're 67 years old with no legal standing, no family connection, and no relevant expertise beyond drawing pretty pictures. Webb's smile returned, sharp. What exactly do you think you can do? Make your life difficult. I doubt that. Then you don't know Scots very well. Alistair moved to the door, opened it. Get out of my shop. The court summons will arrive within the week. I suggest you find a lawyer. Webb paused at the threshold. Mr. Grant, I understand you think you're protecting her. But you're being selfish. What you're doing, these amateur maps, they'll fade. Paper deteriorates. Ink fades. In 50 years, they'll be gone. In 50 years, Sarah will be 61 and able to decide for herself what happens to her memories. That's called growing up. You should try it. Webb left without another word. Alistair locked the door behind him, hands shaking with anger and something that felt dangerously close to fear. He wasn't stupid. Webb was right about one thing. He had no legal claim to Sarah. A month of housing her didn't make him her guardian. And if the courts decided that cultural preservation outweighed a child's well-being, is he gone? Sarah stood at the top of the stairs, pale as paper. He's gone. He said court. He said they could make me. No one's making you do anything, Alistair said with more confidence than he felt. We'll fight it. How? Good question. He was a cartographer, not a lawyer. He had no idea how to fight a court case against an institute with government backing and preservation laws on their side. but he knew someone who might. Father MacLeod, he said. The priest down at St. Giles. He knows people. Legal people. People who fight losing battles for folks who can't afford proper representation. He looked at Sarah. How do you feel about meeting a Catholic priest? Is he nice? He's tolerable. Makes terrible jokes. Drinks too much whiskey. But he's good in a fight. Okay. Okay, Alistair echoed. He closed the shop early that day, first time in 6 years. They walked to St. Giles Cathedral together, Sarah's hand tucked in his, both of them pretending they weren't terrified. Father MacLeod listened to the whole story without interrupting, pouring whiskey for Alistair and hot chocolate for Sarah, his weathered face growing darker with each detail. When Alistair finished, the priest was quiet for a long moment. That's the most Scottish thing I've ever heard, he said finally. Fighting a government institute over an alien child you've known for a month. Can you help? I know a lawyer. Moira Chun, no relation to your Mrs. Chun, different surname spelling. She does refugee advocacy work. Pro bono mostly. Sharp as a knife. Father MacLeod pulled out his phone. She'll take the case. You're sure? Alistair, I've known you 30 years. You're stubborn, antisocial, and you make terrible tea. But you're also the man who sat with Eleanor through every hospital visit, who cried exactly once at her funeral and then never again, who spent 4 years mapping lost places because you don't know how else to grieve. He looked at Sarah. And now you're mapping a lost world for a lost girl. Of course Moira will take the case. It's too beautiful to refuse. Sarah blinked. Beautiful? An old man and a refugee child against corporate exploitation dressed up as science? That's David and Goliath stuff. Moira loves David and Goliath. What happened to Goliath? Sarah asked. Father MacLeod grinned. He lost. The court summons arrived on Tuesday. The hearing was set for 3 weeks from now. Alistair looked at the paperwork, at Sarah's frightened face, at the maps covering his walls. 3 weeks of work, a world slowly taking shape. Right then, he said. We've got 3 weeks. Let's map as much as we can before the hearing. Whatever happens, we'll have that much saved. And if we lose, then we'll have tried. And trying matters. That night, they worked until dawn. Edinburgh slept. Inside, 2 people fought time and courts and extinction with nothing but ink and memory. It would have to be enough. The courtroom smelled like furniture polish and fear. Alistair sat at a table that was too large, in a chair that was too uncomfortable, next to a lawyer he'd met twice. Moira Chun, Father MacLeod had been right, sharp as a knife, shuffled papers with the calm of someone who'd done this 100 times. Sarah sat between them, wearing one of the outfits Mrs. Chun had brought. Clean jeans. A jumper that actually fit. Her silver hair brushed and tied back. She looked small. Terrified. 11. Across the aisle, Dr. Webb sat with 3 lawyers in suits that probably cost more than Alistair's shop was worth. Judge Morrison was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and an expression that gave nothing away. She looked at the case file, then at Sarah, then at Alistair. This is highly unusual, she said. Mr. Grant, you're seeking emergency guardianship of a refugee minor you've known for 5 weeks? 6 weeks, Your Honor, Alistair said. As of yesterday. 6 weeks. Judge Morrison looked at Webb. And Dr. Webb, you're arguing that the Galactic Heritage Preservation Act requires this child to undergo neural memory extraction? Not extraction, Your Honor. Preservation. Webb's voice was smooth. Professional. Sarah Valketh is the sole surviving Calethian with complete memories of the homeworld. Under Section 47 of the GHPA, when a species faces extinction, memory preservation becomes a matter of universal heritage. We're not asking to harm her, merely to record what she knows before it's lost forever. The procedure involves 20 hours of neural scanning, Moira cut in, of a traumatized 11-year-old who's already lost everything. That's not preservation. That's exploitation. The scanning is completely non-invasive. It requires full sensory recall of traumatic events, including planetary bombardment, parental death, and a crash that killed 63 people. Moira's voice was sharp. You're asking a child to relive the worst moments of her life for your database. For posterity, Webb corrected. So that Calethian culture isn't lost. Sarah Valketh isn't a culture. She's a person. Judge Morrison raised a hand. I'll hear testimony. Miss Valketh, would you approach the stand? Sarah looked at Alistair. He nodded. You can do this. She walked to the witness box on shaking legs. Miss Valketh, the judge said gently. I understand you have what's called perfect spatial memory. Can you explain what that means? Sarah's voice was quiet but steady. I remember every place I've ever been. Exactly. Every detail. Distance, dimension, position. Down to the centimeter. Give me an example. This courtroom is 12.3 meters wide, 8.7 meters from the door to your bench, 41 ceiling tiles. The clock on the wall is 2.1 meters above the floor and 3 degrees off level. There's a water stain on the tile above Dr. Webb's head shaped like a bird. Judge Morrison looked up. There was indeed a stain, shaped exactly like a bird. Impressive, the judge said. And you remember your homeworld this way? All of it. Every street. Every building. Every park and plaza and alley. Varnethel had 847 buildings in the Capital District alone. I can tell you the address of each one, the color of each door, how many windows, where the cracks were in the sidewalk. Her voice cracked slightly. My mother used to say I'd never get lost because I'd mapped the world in my head. And Mr. Grant is helping you put those memories on paper? Yes, Your Honor. We've mapped 30 districts so far. He draws what I describe. Every detail exactly right. It takes a long time, but it's... She paused, searching for words. It's safe. When I remember with Alistair, it doesn't hurt as much. But Dr. Webb's procedure could map everything in a fraction of the time. It could. Sarah's hands twisted in her lap. But it would pull everything out. Not just the buildings and streets. Everything. My parents dying. The ship burning. People screaming. All of it, all at once, for strangers to study. She looked at Webb. He says it's for preservation. But I'm not preserving my world that way. I'm just bleeding it out for people who didn't know it existed until it was already gone. The courtroom was very quiet. Judge Morrison made a note. Thank you, Miss Valketh. You may step down. Moira called her witnesses next. Dr. Patel testified about Sarah's improvement over 6 weeks. When I first examined her, she was severely malnourished, dissociative, barely verbal. Now she's gaining weight, sleeping better, engaging in purposeful work. The mapping provides structure and meaning. Forcing neural extraction would undo months of psychological progress. Mrs. Chin testified about community support. That girl needs family, not scientists. Alistair, Mr. Grant, he's family now. To all of us. He takes care of her. She's not alone. Father McLeod testified about Alistair's character. I've known him 30 years. He's difficult, stubborn, and chronically incapable of asking for help. But he loved his wife through 4 years of cancer without complaint. He's mapped lost places for grieving families for free when they couldn't afford his services. And now he's mapping an entire planet for a child who's lost everything. That's not opportunism. That's love. Then Webb's lawyers began their cross-examination. Mr. Grant, the lead lawyer said, you're 67 years old. Correct? Aye. You live alone. You've never raised children. You have no training in child psychology, trauma care, or refugee services. Correct? Correct. You have advanced arthritis in both hands. Your doctor's records indicate you're on pain medication daily. How do you expect to care for an 11-year-old long-term when your health is already declining? Alistair's jaw tightened. My hands work fine for what matters. Do they? Because according to your own testimony, drawing these maps causes you significant pain. You're prioritizing a project over your own well-being, and potentially over Miss Valketh's best interests. The maps are her best interests. Or they're your interests. An old man, recently widowed, childless, filling the void in his life with a refugee child who reminds him what it felt like to have purpose. The lawyer's voice was surgical. Isn't it possible you're the one being selfish here, Mr. Grant? Keeping her from a procedure that could preserve her culture permanently, because you want to be the one who saves her. Alistair felt the words hit like fists. Moira objected. Judge Morrison sustained it. But the damage was done. The hearing lasted 6 hours. At the end, Judge Morrison looked exhausted. This is the most unusual case I've presided over in 20 years, she said. Mr. Grant, your intentions are clearly good. Dr. Webb, your concerns about cultural preservation are valid. But what's best for this child, not for science, not for heritage, but for Sarah Valketh specifically, that's what I need to decide. She closed the file. I'll deliver my verdict in 1 week. Court is adjourned. They filed out in silence. Outside, Edinburgh was gray and cold. Sarah took Alistair's hand. Do you think we won? Alistair thought about the lawyer's words. About his age, his arthritis, his inexperience. about how easy it would be for the judge to decide that a government institute was better equipped than one old man. "I don't know, lass," he said honestly. "I really don't know." They went home and waited. The week that followed was the longest of Alistair's life, and he'd lived through Eleanor's final month, so he knew what long weeks felt like. They mapped anyway. What else were they going to do? Sit around waiting for a judge to decide Sarah's fate? Better to work, better to draw, better to take the fear and turn it into something useful. They finished the government district on Monday, the university quarter on Wednesday. By Friday, they'd started the residential neighborhoods in the eastern hills. Expensive houses, Sarah said, where politicians lived. Her voice was flat when she described them. Those houses had burned first. Alistair's hands hurt constantly now. He'd started taking the pain medication earlier in the day, just to keep working. Dr. Patel noticed and disapproved, but didn't say anything. What was there to say? Either they'd have time to finish this, or they wouldn't. Mrs. Chun brought soup every evening. Father McLeod stopped by daily with updates that weren't really updates. No word yet. These things take time. Have faith. Alistair had never been good at faith. He was better at stubbornness. On Saturday, Sarah woke screaming again. First time in 2 weeks. Alistair brought the maps. Showed her what they'd drawn this week. Reminded her that no matter what happened, they'd saved this much. 33 districts. Thousands of buildings. Her world preserved. What if the judge says yes? Sarah asked in the dark. What if I have to go? Then I'll appeal. I'll fight it. You can't fight forever. Watch me. She almost smiled. Didn't quite make it. Alistair? Aye. Thank you. For trying. His chest did something painful. Haven't lost yet, lass. But he wasn't sure he believed it. The verdict came down on Tuesday. Of course it did. Everything significant in Alistair's life seemed to happen on Tuesdays now. They sat in the same courtroom. Same chairs. Same furniture polish smell, though the fear was sharper this time. This was it. Either Sarah stayed or she didn't. Either they got to finish what they'd started or Dr. Webb got his data extraction. Judge Morrison entered. Everyone stood. The formality of it made Alistair want to scream. Be seated. The judge looked at her notes for a long moment. Then at Sarah. Then at Alistair. I've spent the past week reading testimony, reviewing medical reports, and consulting with colleagues about the Galactic Heritage Preservation Act. This is not an easy decision. She paused. Dr. Webb, your arguments regarding cultural preservation have merit. The loss of Calithian civilization is a tragedy for the entire galactic community. However, hung in the air like a held breath. Sarah Valketh is not an artifact. She's a child. And while the GHPA allows for compulsory memory preservation in cases of species extinction, it does not supersede a minor's right to refuse medical procedures. Neural scanning, regardless of how non-invasive it's claimed to be, is still a medical procedure. And Sarah has clearly, consistently refused consent. Webb's lawyer started to object. Judge Morrison held up a hand. Furthermore, the argument that Mr. Grant is unsuitable due to his age and inexperience is, frankly, insulting to every older person who's ever raised a child. My own grandmother raised me from age 9. She was 73. She was also the best parent I ever had. Alistair felt Sarah's hand find his under the table. What I saw in this testimony, the judge continued, was a child who's been in 3 different placements in 2 months, all of which failed. Then she found Mr. Grant. Or he found her. And for the first time since losing everything, she stopped running. She ate. She slept. She began processing trauma in a healthy, structured way. She laughed. Judge Morrison looked directly at Alistair. Mr. Grant, you're right about one thing. You have no idea what you're doing. You said so yourself. But you're doing it anyway. You're learning. You're asking for help. You've built a support system, Dr. Patel, Mrs. Chun, Father McLeod. That's more than most parents have. She closed the file. Emergency guardianship is granted to Alistair Grant, pending formal adoption proceedings. Dr. Webb, your institute is barred from contacting Miss Valketh regarding neural scanning until she reaches legal age and can provide informed adult consent. At that time, if she chooses to participate, that will be her decision. Not yours. Not Mr. Grant's. Hers. The gavel came down. Court is adjourned. For a moment, Alistair couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The words hadn't quite penetrated yet. Then Sarah was hugging him, crying into his shoulder, and it hit him all at once. They'd won. He'd won. She could stay. We can finish the maps, Sarah said, muffled against his cardigan. We can finish all of it. Alas. His voice was rough. We can finish it. Maura was grinning. Mrs. Chun was crying happy tears. Father MacLeod was shaking his hand and saying something about miracles and stubbornness being God's favorite combination. Dr. Webb left without a word, his lawyers trailing behind him like disappointed shadows. Outside the courthouse, Edinburgh was gray and drizzling. Typical. Alistair looked down at Sarah, at this child who was somehow, impossibly legally his responsibility now, and felt the weight of it, the fear of failing her, the certainty that he would fail her, eventually, because everyone failed everyone, the determination to try anyway. Right then, he said, let's go home. We've got work to do. How much work? 214 districts left to map. Give or take. That'll take years. Good. He started walking, Sarah's hand in his. I've got years. They went home. They made tea. They spread out fresh paper and picked up their pens. And they got back to work, mapping the world, one line at a time. 10 years later, Alistair Grant died on a Tuesday, in his chair by the window, with a pen still in his hand and Sarah holding the other. He'd been 77. The arthritis had won eventually, the way it always does. But he'd held on long enough to see it finished. The Atlas. 12 volumes. 4,000 pages. Every district of Varnethel mapped in obsessive, beautiful detail. Every street. Every building. Every fountain and park and corner shop. 10 years of work. 10 years of Sarah remembering and Alistair drawing, line by careful line. The last page had been completed 3 days ago. The dedication page. For Eleanor, who asked me to map something beautiful. For Sarah, who showed me what beautiful meant. A.G. Is it finished? He'd asked that evening, squinting at the final binding. It's finished, Sarah had confirmed. She was 21 now. Silver hair long and tied back. Still too thin, but healthy. Strong. Studying cartography at Edinburgh University, where else? And working part-time at the shop. His shop. Their shop. Good, Alistair had said. Bloody good. That night he'd been tired. More tired than usual. Dr. Patel had come by, checked his vitals, given Sarah a look that said soon. Sarah had known. She'd pulled her chair next to his. Held his hand. Waited. Don't be dramatic, Alistair had muttered. I'm just resting. I know. The shop's yours. All the maps. The tools. Everything. I know. And you'll finish your degree. No dropping out to run the shop full-time. Promise me. I promise. Good. His eyes had closed. Opened again. Sarah? Yes. Did we do it? Did we save your world? She'd looked at the volumes stacked on the restoration table. 12 books that contained an entire planet. Every memory she'd carried across space and time, preserved in ink and paper and love. Yes, she'd said. We saved it. Good, he'd said again. And then quieter. Eleanor would have liked you. I wish I'd met her. You did, in a way. She's in every map we made. Every careful line. Every detail that mattered. His hand squeezed hers weakly. She's in you being here. In me not being alone. She'd be furious with me if I'd let you go. I'm glad you didn't. Me too, lass. Me too. He'd fallen asleep then. Peaceful. No pain. Just tired. He hadn't woken up. The funeral was small. Mrs. Chun brought enough food to feed an army. Father MacLeod delivered the eulogy. Something about stubborn Scotsmen and improbable miracles, and how Alistair Grant had done more with 10 years and a refugee child than most people did with a lifetime of preparation. Dr. Patel cried. Mrs. Chun cried. Half the neighborhood showed up. People Alistair had drawn maps for over 40 years. Lost places. Lost loved ones. Lost worlds. He'd drawn them all. Maura Chun came, though Alistair hadn't seen her since the trial. He was a good man, she told Sarah. Difficult. But good. He was, Sarah agreed. They buried him next to Eleanor. Same cemetery. Same gray Edinburgh weather. Same sense of something precious ending, but not completely ending. Because 3 months later, Sarah opened the Grant Foundation for Cartographic Memory Preservation in the shop's expanded space. Funded by donations and grants, and the sale of carefully licensed reproductions of the Atlas. Never the originals. Never exploitation. The Foundation's mission, to map lost places through survivor testimony. Refugee communities. Displaced peoples. Anyone who'd lost their home and wanted to remember it. Sarah trained other cartographers, humans and aliens both, in Alistair's methods. Slow, careful, on the survivor's terms. No neural scanning, no extraction, just memory and ink and time. The Atlas of Calith Prime lived in a climate-controlled room, available for viewing by appointment. Sarah gave tours herself when she could, told stories about the bakery with purple pastries, the fountain where she learned to swim, the blue door on Kelmar Avenue where her mother used to wait for her after school. She told stories about Alistair too, about the grumpy old cartographer who'd caught her when she fell, who'd drawn maps by lamplight, who'd fought courts and institutions and his own mortality to give her a home, who'd taught her that preservation wasn't about perfect digital copies. It was about love and patience and caring more about the person than the data. On Tuesdays, she'd made peace with Tuesdays. Sarah taught beginning cartography at the foundation, mostly to refugee children, kids who'd lost everything and needed to remember that their homes had existed, that their memories mattered. She taught them Alistair's way. Start with your street, your building, your front door. Draw what you remember. Take your time. Rest when it hurts. Your memories are yours. No one takes them unless you choose to share. 10 years after Alistair's death, Sarah stood in the shop, the foundation, looking at the atlas. At 10 years of work and love and stubborn refusal to let a world be forgotten. Mrs. Chun still brought soup on Thursdays. She was 87 now, moving slower, but still fierce. Father McLeod still visited, though his jokes were getting worse, and his hair was completely white. Dr. Patel had retired but volunteered at the foundation, helping assess trauma survivors who wanted to participate in mapping projects. The community Alistair had built held. Sarah picked up a pen, one of Alistair's old ones, worn smooth by 40 years of use, and looked at the blank paper in front of her. A new project. A Martian refugee who'd fled the colony wars. Another lost home. Another person who needed to remember. She dipped the pen in ink. Outside, Edinburgh lived on. Inside, the work continued. One line at a time. One memory at a time. One person at a time. Forever, if that's what it took. Because Alistair had taught her that maps weren't about perfection. They were about care. About taking something broken and making it whole enough to hold. About preservation that let people live while they remembered. About love in the end. Everything was about love. Sarah began to draw.